was at a restaurant. It wasn't my favorite. It will remain nameless, but it was not my favorite in town. But what was my favorite is that on the menu was a moonshine flight. And I said, well, if a moonshine flight is on a menu at a restaurant, you kind of have to order it, right?
You do,
so
of course.
I ordered the moonshine flight, and the server, the young guy in his 20s, leans over real close. He goes, good choice. But if you want real moonshine, he kind of looks over his shoulder. Let me know. My uncle makes the best stuff. We can have it brought to wherever you are. I'm like, where am I?
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. In just a moment, you'll meet Ian Joseph, real estate investor turned hospitality entrepreneur who is on a mission to bring a new kind of micro-resort experience to life. What started as a simple desire to buy a vacation home led him to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, a historic spa town with deep hospitality roots. Now, Ian is in the early stages of launching Branch, an experiential micro-resort designed to blend striking architecture, immersive nature experiences, and strong community connections. Branch hasn't broken ground yet, but Ian is deep in the trenches, securing financing, finalizing design plans, and laying the foundation for what he hopes will be the first of many unique stays. Inspired by brands like Live Oak Lake, he's determined to build a hospitality concept that goes beyond beautiful accommodations and taps into the story, history, and culture of its location. In this episode, we dive into why Ian chose Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and what makes it a hidden gem ready for a hospitality revival. We talk about the rise of micro-resorts and why entrepreneurs without traditional hotel backgrounds are leading the way. We also talk about how Ian is designing Branch to integrate with the local community, partnering with restaurants, chefs, and wellness providers instead of competing with them with on-site offerings. Ian also discusses how he's designing unexpected locally inspired experiences for guests. Think moonshine tastings, fruit wine flights, and hyper-local food collaborations. And then we talk about what he's learned about raising capital for a hospitality development project, including securing debt financing and finding the right equity partners. And last but certainly not least, we talk about Ian's long-term vision for Branch and why he believes the best hospitality brands will be built around story-driven destinations. All right, friends. Alrighty, folks, we are live. Ian, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, fine sir?
I'm doing great, Zach. It is great to be here talking to you.
It's great to have you, man. I mean, for our listeners, we were just talking about this before we hit record, but, I get busy sometimes and I have to reschedule some things, sometimes, and guests have to reschedule things sometimes as well. But Ian, I think you take the cake for the number for the most reschedules of anyone I've had on this podcast. And I feel so bad. It's one of those moments where I got hit by a bug, my son got sick. I had a last minute trip pop up within 12 hours. I had to be on a plane, basically everything that sounds like an excuse that people use to get out of something. I've basically told you. The difference is they were all true. They were all very, very true. And yet, you were gracious enough to still come on the podcast after all those cancellations and share your story with me today. So I am sorry, but I'm also very excited to dive into all the incredible things that you're doing. So thanks for your patience, man.
Well, apology accepted. And there was a moment that maybe I thought you didn't exist, but then I also reminded myself that you have a great track record and a great history of shows that I've listened to. So it is great to finally be here with you and having this conversation.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Let's dive into the story of Branch. You are building an experiential micro resort out in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and I've got a lot of questions because that area I know it a little bit. Being from the Washington D.C. metro area, and you haven't seen. While you've seen some of these other areas explode, the Texas Hill Country. I like to pick on Hocking Hills in outside of Columbus a lot. There are these pockets. Obviously everything going on in Smoky Mountains. There are these pockets of kind of like micro resorts, unique stays that have popped up everywhere. My big gripe for all my friends in the DC metro area is there aren't great examples of places, 2+2-ish hours from the city where you can go and escape like there are in some of these other cities. And so I've been waiting for folks to kind of develop these projects. And I know of a couple in the works, but how did you come up with this idea? What inspired it? Just go back to the beginning and share a little bit of the origin story with us on what Branch is.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Branch, this was not done intentionally. It all has kind of come to me. And that starts when I first decided that I wanted to buy a vacation home and operate a short-term rental. And I looked within a couple hours of my house here in Washington, D.C. And I did that because I wanted to do things myself for the first one. Before I tried to buy something and operate remote, I wanted to do one that was close enough that I could do it myself from here. And I looked all over Virginia and went to actually kind of went back to a trip that my family took back in August of 2020, which of course was peak COVID.
Yeah.
And we went to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia.
Okay.
And the reason we went there is because I knew somebody who had a cabin there in the woods, and it was great. And I was reminded of that trip when I was looking for a house, and just went back to the town and kind of fell in love all over again with our first, during COVID trip to get out of town. And everything that I loved about Berkeley Springs back in 2020, when I started looking again in 2023, was just tenfold better, more investment in the town. There's some of the shops and restaurants that had closed during COVID were coming back, but the people there, the history there is so rich. It is a hospitality rich history, because Berkeley Springs is known as America's first spa. And that is because it is the place that George Washington would go to get out of town. Wow. And so that culture has really just lasted over the years for the town. And just like you said, when you were looking at Berkeley Springs, my polling of the folks in this area is that about 9 out of 10 have never even heard of it. And so this, that's where I decided I wanted to buy a vacation home, and it turned into so much more than that, which is now Branch, and the building of a micro resort and a brand, and hopefully after Branch Berkeley Springs, there will be others that are come about because of the same kind of things that have come to me about Berkeley Springs and about this town and its characteristics.
I'm always interested in people like you, Ian, who, you've had an impressive professional career. You don't necessarily have a hospitality background, right? And there seems to be this like wave of entrepreneurs, many of whom I've been fortunate enough to talk to on this podcast, who have all of a sudden become really interested in developing micro resorts and building these branded boutique hotels. And many of them start with a couple of vacation rentals, and then they quickly realize, oh wow, I want to do something bigger, and I want to build a cohesive brand around something. And sometimes that works for their existing assets, and other times it doesn't. Why are you doing this though? What's the, sure, you want a vacation rental and you were inspired when you went out there, but like there's a lot of people that have one or two vacation rental homes that have no ambitions of becoming a true hospitality entrepreneur. What is it about the space or this moment that is inspiring to you?
So I think it's a few different things. I mean, I'll go back to how I ended up going from wanting to have a cabin in the woods for myself and my family and maybe rent it on the side to now like building a hospitality brand.
Yeah.
And it started with one house, and I discovered how to buy and buy and operate a short term rental. So I did this in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. I bought a half acre parcel of land, and one of the other things that I've always wanted to do myself, other than being an entrepreneur, is I've always wanted to build my own house. I've
Wow.
always been around real estate. I started my career after college in commercial construction management.
Hmm.
And then I went back to grad school and got a business degree with a specialty in finance. And then I went into commercial banking, and I have financed projects over the years. And so the whole time, though, that I always kind of was around real estate and really liked real estate. I invested in a long-term rental here in Washington, D.C. back in 2016. And at the time I thought maybe I'll buy another one or two of those. Maybe I'll build up a portfolio of long-term rentals. But things happened. My second child, I just got distracted from building out more of a real estate portfolio back in 2016. And then COVID happened, and fast forward to 2023 when I decided I wanted to really get back into real estate investing. And through the first way to do that was through this vacation rental in West Virginia.
Yeah.
But the difference this time was that the hospitality side really spoke to me. So I had the one long-term rental in 2023 when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next in real estate. I discovered hospitality and the short-term rental cabin in the woods that I could rent for my family, but also have for my family, but also rent for a profit. So I bought a parcel in Berkeley Springs and built a house. So I've always wanted to build a house. Built this A-frame cabin, which is getting some attention now on Instagram because
It's beautiful.
It's
I've seen it.
Instagrammable type of property.
It's very, very beautiful.
Thank you. So that was the first property that I bought. But right after I bought that land, that parcel, and started the building process, another listing came up that I thought was very interesting. And this was 26 acres, about 5 minutes outside of the town of Berkeley Springs. And I went to see it. And when I stepped on the property, it was one of those moments where you just know that it was something special. It had two houses on it, a main house and a guest house that were built in the early 2000s. And it was 26 acres of wooded landscape with 180 feet of elevation change across the property, multiple streams, a pond. And I just knew it was going to be something special someday. And so I purchased that property, not really, again, knowing that it was going to turn into Branch Berkeley Springs, this micro resort, but that it would be two really nice vacation rentals. And then I thought maybe I'll build another one or two. And what ended up happening while I was renovating both of the houses there between October of 2023 and February of 2024 was that I came across somebody named Isaac French and what he did in Waco, Texas with Live Oak Lake. And I joined his mastermind group. And so when I came across Isaac and saw what he had done with Live Oak Lake, it was that moment of that's it. The light bulb went off. And, again, just letting things come to me. Like I bought this property knowing that it would be something special, not knowing exactly what it was going to be. And learning about what Isaac did and that this whole phenomenon of, experiential hospitality and development, the light bulb went off. And I immediately started about a year ago planning for this location, this development in Berkeley Springs.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, as listeners of this show know, I'm a huge fan of Isaac's, and I've been fortunate to get to have him on the podcast many times, and that's awesome. So you find out about Live Oak Lake, you get inspired by that sort of vision, and then you figure out, okay, like how do I actualize something like this in Berkeley Springs? I want to talk about Berkeley Springs actually, because I think it is one of those kind of like even to your point, even people in the DC metro area don't know a lot about it. I've been there several times because they've got great hiking around there, and I think I've maybe been. Do you go through Berkeley Springs to get to Harper's Ferry? Is that typically? Do you typically go through Berkeley Springs or not
You
necessarily?
can. You
You
probably
can.
would have
Okay.
gone a little bit out of the way if you're going from Washington D.C. to Harper's Ferry, but you
Yeah.
can, yes.
I'm trying to remember why, because I don't think I was there for Berkeley Springs, but I was driving through. Anyways, point being, I've stopped there many times, and every time I've been there, it's been like, why isn't this like, from my perspective, anyways, as an outsider, right? Uh, it's this beautiful, like quaint little town that has so much potential. There's beautiful hiking right around it, even like the elevation of the town and like you're driving through. It's very picturesque, and I distinctly remember thinking like, why don't people come here for like a long weekend? And then I did at the time. This was, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I did a quick like search for hotels nearby and like vacation rental, and I was like, oh well, that's why. Like there's like not great accommodations around here, at least accommodations that I'd prefer to stay in, and so perhaps that's the reason. And then I didn't really think about it again, and until we connected, and so talk to us a little bit about sort of like what you think is special about Berkeley Springs, because a lot of people that are listening to this conversation right now also have a dream of developing a micro resort. Maybe they've found land already, or maybe they're still in the market for land. And I think the temptation can be to think that like it's just done. It's like overdone. There's the opportunity, the moment of 2020 and 21 is behind us, and that's when you should have gotten in if you were going to do something like this. Rates were much more, amenable, and so I'm just curious, like, what was it about Berkeley Springs in particular that spoke to you, and then what are some things that you think you'd encourage other folks to consider as they search for the right place to bring their idea to life?
So first about Berkeley Springs is that it is a little bit of a hidden gem. So,
Yeah.
and again, this is formulated some of what we are doing at Branch and the strategy that we have and our brand. I like the fact that a lot of people today don't know about Berkeley Springs.
Yeah.
I feel like part of our brand and part of what Branch is going to do is to shine some light on these little hidden gems across the country. And as I got to know Berkeley Springs more, as I was working there on the renovations and going up to to work on the design for Branch Berkeley Springs, I got to know the people. I mean, it comes down to the people are the most important part, and the people of Berkeley Springs are just so generous and such a world away from the hustle and bustle of the big cities that are close: Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore.
Yeah.
They're all within a 3-hour drive of Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. And yet it's still a little bit under the radar. But it was also, like I said before, where George Washington would go to get out of town. So
Yeah.
it has this like fabric to it that is just really strong. It's very welcoming. It's also a little bit against the grain from what you would expect in a state like West Virginia that doesn't have the best reputation historically, although it is really coming on strong from a vacation, hospitality, and tourism standpoint, which I love to see, as it
Yeah.
should. But the town, again, being somewhat unassuming, close by, yet kind of undiscovered, it has a rich hotel. I'm sorry, not hotel. It doesn't have the accommodations. That was one of the things that attracted me to it
Yeah.
from an investment standpoint. Is I saw an opportunity to provide accommodations that you even noticed were lacking. But it has restaurants. It has spas. It has a lot of things to do. Like you said, hiking. It's very close to the Potomac River for any sort of river sports. Mountain biking is becoming a really big thing in the area. There's a really great state park. West Virginia, also little known fact, has a really good state park network, in addition to a few really great national parks. But the thing that is attracting me to Berkeley Springs is something that after I realized why I liked Berkeley Springs so much, the light bulb again went off that said, oh, there are more towns like this in other places. And for me, the fun, like what is really fun, is discovering a place like Berkeley Springs, a small town that has things to do, but also is so far away from what we're all used to in the big cities. And Branch's strategy moving forward, and our whole brand is about these hidden gems within a close enough distance to bigger cities for people like me, like you, who want to get out of town for a long weekend or a week, or have a group of friends go, or a couple's getaway, or bigger, thinking a little bit bigger than that. When Branch Berkeley Springs opens, it'll be a place that somebody could rent out the entire property for a small destination wedding or a corporate retreat. And all of these ideas came to me because of the experiences I was having with guests just within the last year. The two houses on the property already, we've had at least 7 anniversary trips.
Wow.
We've had 3 honeymoons. We've had a proposal.
Wow.
We've had a 94th birthday for a family that came from all over the country. And I'm I'm thinking, geez, this is our little cabins in Berkeley Springs, like on this property, and people are coming, and that to me is what's really special, is making those moments possible for people to come together and discover nature, discover the wellness that the town has to offer, as well as the things to do in restaurants and all of the activities that are local.
What's really interesting about that too is there's this kind of like business that I think entrepreneurs like yourself get kind of ushered into, maybe even like accidentally, which is sort of like the events business, so to speak. Obviously, it's a little bit more intentional for some than others, but right now, I think we're still living through a moment where you could go and have a micro wedding, or 50th birthday, or a retirement a party with and do like an escape, right, to somewhere beautiful like your stays, or Branch in the future. And many times it's a fraction of the cost of like a real wedding. It's a fraction of the cost of like any sort of like larger destination, like, hey, we're all going to go fly to Europe or do a family cruise for, mom's 50th birthday or 60th birthday, whatever it is, right? There are these like moments that I think, and this is probably fleeting because smart people like yourself will probably end up like upcharging up the wazoo, and then like the the delta between like just buying out like the hotel versus buying out the beautiful micro resort might not be as it might not be as great as it is today. But I think right now we're still sort of like living in this cool moment where hospitality entrepreneurs can charge a little bit more, obviously, if there's going to be some experience, as they should. But for the consumer, it's still often much more affordable than an alternative path. And I think that that's just like really cool because it's very memorable. I think like my wife and I got married in Italy, and we actually found, I mean, it was crazy. DC weddings are like ridiculously expensive. And so we like basically were able to take 65 of our closest family and friends to Italy. We didn't pay for tickets, but like we paid for the whole like, 2-night, 3-day kind of stay and all the food. It was literally cheaper doing all of that than it would have been to do the DC wedding that we were like looking at, which is wild, right? But point being that like that memory lives on, forever for us, obviously, but then all the people that we got to bring to an experience like that. And again, it was cheaper than if we had done what everybody else does. And so I think we're living through this really cool moment where hospitality entrepreneurs like yourself get to capitalize on these moments. And again, we'll see how long they last before they end up being cost equivalent to something else. But I think right now it's still like this magical opportunity that you're kind of getting into. It's not, you're not just in the lodging space, right? Like you have the opportunity anyways to get into the event space as well, which is exciting.
We certainly do, but we are going to do it differently. So one of the things that Branch is founded on is community. So our 3 pillars are design, nature, and community. A lot of people, in this industry, you may have been mouthing the last one, like it's so common, which is design, nature, and wellness. Yeah. Wellness is a part of everything we do. It crosses. It is part of the design, is part of the being in nature, and is part of where our locations are and who you'd come in contact with. But we chose community for the 3rd pillar for a very important reason. It has to do with those amenities that you mentioned earlier. We could have built, we could have designed Branch Berkeley Springs to have a spa and a restaurant
Yeah.
and those amenities that everybody else has, right? That somebody building are there. That's very common. Our thought is, why would we do that and become competition for the local restaurants and the local spas? It's one of the reasons we're in Berkeley Springs, and it's one of the reasons that Branch will be in other towns that have similar characteristics, is because we want to partner with those businesses that are already there and help them do more. And we think that will be an even better experience for our guests because they'll have more to choose from. Whereas if we were to offer a restaurant on site, that's, where we would want them to go so that we could then upcharge them. Well, we're not going to do that. We are going to partner with the local restaurants and chefs to bring a variety, bring an option to a guest. So the idea that we have right now that we're going to try and implement is for restaurants is we'll help you make a reservation. That's like level one. We'll make a reservation for you. Here's the restaurants that are, friends of Branch Berkeley Springs. Or one of the things about going into the woods is a lot of people actually like to cook themselves, but maybe they don't want to go shopping because that's a pain, right? And you're only there for 3 or 4 days. So we're going to see if restaurants are going to be willing to help prepare meal kits, and we'll have them in the refrigerator when the guests arrive so that they can then follow a local chef's recipe for a certain dish that may be unique to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. So that's level 2. Cook for yourself, but it's a local recipe. Level 3, which is the ultimate experience, is let's bring the chef into the unit and have them cook for you. So that's our approach to food and beverage. And then our approach to the kind of the spa experience, very similar, is there's spas in town. There's great places to do yoga in town. There's great places to get a massage, do all of that. We can help you make a reservation, or you can have a private massage in your own unit. Like, we'll bring them from town and just partner that way. The one example that everybody asks me, what do you mean? Like, how are you going to partner with local business? Well, the one that I always tell people, I was at dinner at one of the restaurants in town, and I love this part of my job, which is the research part, because I'll go to every restaurant once before I'll repeat because I'm doing research. So I was at a restaurant. It wasn't my favorite. It will remain nameless, but it was not my favorite in town. But what was my favorite is that on the menu was a moonshine flight. And I said, well, if a moonshine flight is on a menu at a restaurant, you kind of have to order it, right?
You do,
so
of course.
I ordered the moonshine flight, and the server, the young guy in his 20s, leans over real close. He goes, good choice. But if you want real moonshine, kind of looks over his shoulder, let me know. My uncle makes the best stuff. We can have it brought to wherever you are. I'm like, where am I? And this is what I love about this town, right? Is that is a unique experience.
Yeah.
The whole reason I'm telling you that about something on site is people ask, well, what do you mean by something unique on site? I'm like, well, let's just say, you're coming Saturday and that there's a moonshine tasting on site. So we'll bring local businesses on site to do special things, unique things for our guests. And we'll have areas on site. We're designing in amenities and areas on site to be able to facilitate partnerships with those local businesses.
I love that. I love that idea. And what's super interesting, I was actually I popped into a Starbucks 2 days ago, and they were doing like a meet the police sort of like free coffee hour or something like that. So there was a bunch of like awesome like local police officers, and they had like pamphlets, and they were like, I don't know, maybe it was a recruiting event, but if it wasn't like particularly obvious that it was a recruiting event. And anyways, it was kind of to be honest, the whole little event was kind of weird because I wasn't really sure what to do. And anyways, but I said hi to police. I thanked them for their service, and like I had a great chat with one of them quickly, got a free cup of Starbucks coffee, and then went and I did my work. But I was thinking, oh, you know what? Like why aren't there more? There were. I feel like growing up, there were always people. There were always like typically younger entrepreneurs, or maybe some social programs, maybe public servants, kind of popping into schools, right? Or popping into. They were standing outside of like the local supermarket, right? I think about Costco, right, and all the sampling that they do. It doesn't. I haven't seen that as frequently as I remember seeing it, at least growing up. And I feel like with these micro resorts is an incredible opportunity to go and partner with, especially if it's a younger entrepreneur, a younger restaurateur, and say, hey, like we want to put you in front of, a caliber of guest that is paying maybe probably double or triple the ADRs of like the places, around town. Maybe slightly more affluent guests, like here's a really cool opportunity to demo your latest, I don't know, hoagie sandwich or whatever it is that they're doing, or moonshine flights. And as a guest, that is such an incredible experience because it feels like you're connecting with a local entrepreneur, which you are, right? And for them, it could be write it off as a marketing expense, right, or whatever. Or maybe you even cover a little bit of that cost for the restaurateur. I love those ideas, and I think that's actually few and far between. I think one of the things that I know that you've thought about this and you have come to a wiser decision, I'm sure. But one of the things that I know people have struggled with is, let's say your ADRs are double or triple that of the other lodging in town. Sometimes when there's not a great restaurant in town, it like that guest wants a great restaurant, right? Or they want a more, not necessarily even like fine dining, but they want like a really great restaurant. And I think some of folks I've talked to in this space who are in towns that are, I don't want to say like, let's just use hidden gem. That's a nice way of saying it. Places that are a little bit more hidden gemmy, sometimes they lack great restaurants. They have restaurants, but they lack greatness. How have you thought about that? I haven't ever eaten in Berkeley Springs, I don't think. So this is no judgment on Berkeley Springs in particular, but how have you like weighed that decision?
Absolutely.
How do you think about that?
Yeah. So again, one of the things I like about Berkeley Springs is, fortunately, the restaurant scene is like far outpacing the accommodation scene.
Amazing.
So
problem solved. Yeah.
It is. There are not multiple options for white tablecloth fine dining, but that is one of the things that we like about it, is that it has a little bit of an edge. And
yeah.
To me, it's all about setting the expectations for the guest. And so, although we're fortunate in Berkeley Springs to have a wide range of restaurant types, and there is a restaurant called Lot 12 Public House, which is a chef's tasting menu. I mean, he's a really good local chef who has a fine dining establishment.
Nice.
And so we have that, but we wouldn't even necessarily need to have that, because I feel like we would be setting expectations for the guest. If a guest comes to, I will say there's not any branch property now, present or future, and expects, an Amangari experience, that they're not going to get it, but they're going to get something. They're going to get something different. They're going to get something more accessible. So all of our places are going to be, locations are going to be in an accessible place where somebody can come multiple times a year if they want. We've already had guests come back for different reasons with different groups. And that's our whole idea, and the way we're designing even the structures to encourage guests to come back in different size groups than they may have come with originally. But it's all about that expectation. And that's something we're going to have to manage, of course, is that guest expectation, and how much do we want to push the ADRs to the point, do we push them to the point where guests now expect like a lot of high-end restaurant, like really high-end restaurant experience. But I don't think we'll get to that. I don't think we'll get to that point. Our ADRs are going to be healthy enough. Our design is being done in a way that allows for ADRs that we think are achievable for the guest, that has the expectation that they're coming there, to drink more beer and moonshine than Napa Valley wine, and caviar. Like it's not a wine and caviar kind of place. It is a moonshine beer. There's actually something there called fruit wine. Have you ever had fruit wine?
Fruit wine, like I've had pineapple wine.
Okay, it's basically wine made from fruit.
Yeah,
and
like not grapes. Yeah,
another partner that I hope to have for a guest experience is the fruit wine. There's a winery, Cold Run Valley Winery that makes fruit wine. And I went for a tasting expecting wine
Yeah.
and getting fruit wine. But it was another one of those hidden gems. I left. It was so much fun because it was different.
Yeah.
And because
yeah.
the owner is quirky and really entertaining and funny. And, those are the kind of experiences that, that we hope to give guests a little bit of the unexpected. They're going to come for the nature. They're going to come for the relaxation, which they're 100% going to get. But then they're going to stay and return because they did something they've never done before. They experienced something that they've never experienced before, or they bumped into somebody else, on the property at one of the many places we're going to encourage people to bump into each other that they had never met. And now maybe they've decided to come back and rent maybe they each rented a couple's cabin and they're going to come back and rent two of them together or one of the larger cabins together. And, those are the kind of experiences that we're trying to create.
I love it. And I think what you're hitting at too is, or what you're getting at is this idea of like what I call sort of like the new luxury. And I've been trying to really like define this, and I've been like writing about it a lot on LinkedIn because I think that it's what I want. It's what I think my friends want. It's what I see. And obviously there are much smarter people that are also seeing these trends and responding accordingly, than me. But I think what you're hitting at is this idea of experiencing something that is novel is luxurious, right? So like, meaning I'm going to go back and tell all my friends that I had a moonshine tasting or a fruit wine tasting. They're going to be like, what?
Yes.
Right. And it like immediately is something you want to show off, whether on Instagram or, in real life. And those are like, that is the new luxury, is finding opportunities for people to experience things that are so unique that they can't help but tell other people about, because it makes them look cool, and I don't even think it's about them looking cool. It's just an interesting story to tell, right? So when you're catching up with friends, it's like, oh, what have you been up to lately? It's the first thing that pops into your mind because it was so novel, it was so different, right?
Yeah.
And I think cultivating those sorts of experiences are what the best entrepreneurs are doing today. The other thing I was going to say is maybe there's a hack in what you were just sharing, Ian, about this idea of finding markets, finding these hidden gems where maybe the restaurants are outpacing the lodging, and that sort of being a leading indicator of like a potentially interesting market. And then the other thing is that I've got a market for you, by the way, that you should look at.
Was it the entire? I was just going to say, is it the entire state of Maine?
Oh yes, there you go.
Because all of the restaurateurs have escaped the horrible life of New York City and Boston to Maine. So the food
most
scene
amazing place ever.
Yeah, of course.
It's just insane. But right, and people always are like, oh, Maine. But like, look, I've been all over Maine, right? And like, there are some of these developments, but like, they are few and far between. Like Booth Bay Harbor, my favorite town in like Maine. It's an hour north of Portland, Maine, right? It's there are not, and I don't know anything about the actual like local like county like regulations and whatnot. So maybe the reason no one's there is because it's freaking impossible. That's highly likely given that it is Maine. But point being that those sorts of places, there are great establishments, right? There's a nice little like downtown. It's on the water, right? It's a harbor, obviously. It's beautiful, but the lodging is like terrible. Like there's like no great lodging, and it's an hour north of Portland, and there's so much to do in Maine, and it's a freaking amazing magical place. And anyways, that's where Brand should go next.
Yeah, it's funny that you say Booth Bay Harbor, because that was the second place I ever went on vacation when I was younger.
Really?
I grew up with a single mom, and she worked two different jobs. We didn't have the means to go on vacation, and I was probably, it was either somewhere after fourth grade or fifth, somewhere in that age range, upper elementary school, when we tagged along with friends for two vacations. One was to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, which now we go with my family and kids, and is a lot of fun to kind of have that come full circle. But the other one that we went in the same summer there, and then we came home, and immediately the next day left with other friends to tag along on their vacation to Booth Bay Harbor. And it was the most magical place for this little kid from Ohio to go to the coast and Booth Bay, which it was funny. There's 100 towns that I would love to have a branch property just in Maine, and the fact that you also love Booth Bay Harbor and that has a warm place in my heart is just really coincidental.
Dude, that's amazing. Oh, I love freaking stories like that. Well, I think it's a sign, man. Hey, start
Yeah.
looking into it. And I know literally the best short-term rental I've ever stayed at. Like my favorite host in the world is in Boothbay Harbor, Maine, and I talk about her like I don't know every other podcast. But we become really good friends with her, and this is this is the second place we ever stayed when my wife and I were doing the whole nomad thing. And I mean, I was just texting with her this morning actually because our Christmas card that we sent to her was like returned, and I was like, "Did you guys didn't move, did you?" And turns out we just put the wrong address. But point being that like it is a magical place. Lodging is horrible. Like the restaurant scene is booming. I mean, in Maine, there's just it's kind of hard to have a bad meal, quite frankly. And there's just a huge influx of like wealth that is coming there now,
Yeah.
especially with climate change. Like, you've got the whole like northern migration happening, which
Right.
people like to talk about. And anyways, yeah, we're
The
off on a tangent now. But I think like markets like that are fascinating. And operators like you, actually, quite frankly, who are not going to come in and do like a 250 key, like,
Right.
resort. Those are operators like you are what the county is looking for.
Yeah, that to bring it back to Branch and
Yes, please.
and our brand. No, you hit on a lot of things that are key to what we're trying to do and the markets that we want to go next. So, the accessibility is a big component. So we want to be, in these small kind of hidden gem of towns that have those Berkeley Springs, West Virginia characteristics of being very welcome, being a hospitality culture, this tourism culture. We want to have that and have that be within a drive distance of 10 million plus people.
Yep.
The one that the one that we haven't talked about yet is the story, and part of what we're trying to do is help the guest have an experience that is part of a story. So Berkeley Springs has this story. That's how we started the conversation. It was America's first spa.
Yep.
So like I'm always looking for towns that have some sort of little catchphrase to them that is special. And I spent a lot of time with one of your other guests, Samantha Hardcastle, with the Storied Experience.
She's
And,
great. Yeah.
oh my gosh, she like totally opened my eyes to like making the connection. I was already loving Berkeley Springs for so many things that were related to its story, and then having that story kind of told through the Branch Berkeley Springs property and guest experience. And she kind of like just talking with her and hearing even her episode with you just really like brought that together, that is a key component of what we're trying to build is having branch properties be in these areas that have some sort of story. I love St. Augustine, Florida. Did you know that that's the oldest city in the country? That was the first city in the United States, St. Augustine, Florida. So, something like that, like that just pops out to me in my head. Deadwood, South Dakota. I'm going to give away all my secrets now, aren't I? Deadwood, South Dakota, because Deadwood, South Dakota, although it might not meet the population accessibility criteria, but I just love the idea of that, because it was the last town in the United States to not have organized law, the last lawless town in the United States. I mean, how cool would it be to have a property in the last lawless town in the United States?
I can see like a saloon. I can see sort of like an elevated like jail. Like there's so many fun things you could do there. So
many ways to tell a story there. Yeah. And those towns exist all over the country. They do. That's what's made this first one so much fun to get to the point it is today. And I just can't wait to see it come out of the ground and welcome guests and get their feedback. But it's so much fun to think about other places that we could do this as well.
I got another one for you. A little bit more complex, and there's some competition already, but like Santa Fe, New Mexico, right? Like they've got like the oldest church in the like the first church in the United States is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And like of all the places I have ever been in the US, Santa Fe feels like you're not in the United States. Like,
I love that.
Like the architecture obviously is just beautiful, but like the culture, the people, there are incredible restaurants in Santa Fe, and like no one I don't know, no one on the East Coast anyways that I know like goes to Santa Fe. Like it's one of those places where it's like everyone knows where it is, but people don't go there. Maybe it's a more popular destination in like the Southwest. I'm sure it is. But when I went there, I was like, why don't my friends just come? Like, why don't people take trips to Santa Fe? Like,
Yeah.
you should fly into Santa Fe. And then actually, I was looking at some. I mean, they've got some beautiful spas and resorts, but there aren't these like micro resorts yet. And again, I have no idea what the regulation is in that particular area. Probably tough as well. But I think that there's huge opportunity in places like that. Talk about like a storied town like Santa Fe has. Santa Fe is oozing with story.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll have to look into Santa Fe too.
Yeah, you'll have to check me on those numbers. But so I mean, so you guys are. One of the things actually I wanted to ask you, Ian, is fundraising. A lot of folks, like I get people emailing me. I mean, not daily, but like, you know, a few times a week, right? With, hey, Zach, I'm like, can you look, this is a pitch deck, or like, hey, Zach, like, you know, I want to do this thing. Like, what do you think? Do you know, like, I've got this idea. I've got a proven track record. I've built like 3 of these tree houses, but now I want to scale up to 15 and I want to do it on this new site or whatever, but I need outside capital to do it. Like, what do you think? Do you know anybody? Like, there's definitely this energy right now of like entrepreneurs with these great ideas. And like, you look at their decks, you look at the numbers, and it's like, yeah, I mean, like, this isn't like, I don't think you're off here, but people need access to capital. How have you thought about fundraising? Any like lessons that you've learned along the way? How are you going to go about financing, you know, this first development of Branch?
So I'll start with the answer to the last question about how we're planning on financing it, and that is with a combination of debt and equity.
Yep.
I am right now in the debt process, so maybe by the time this airs, we'll have that part wrapped up. Fingers crossed. But and that process, I think, is difficult for people who've never done it before. I mean, I've been on the other. One of my advantages, I've been on the other side, so
Yeah.
I know what the bank is looking for. I know what the what they want to see. I know how they're thinking and the process, and so that's been very beneficial. Like that, having somebody on your team. It doesn't have to be the lead, like I am. It can be anybody on the team who has the experience of going to banks and getting debt funding before is helpful. And the other side is the equity piece, and but believe it or not, I mean, I didn't know what kind of response I was going to get, but just thinking maybe it's my engineer like education coming through as a civil engineer in undergrad, which I've never actually used, but I was in construction and now, but the whole engineering kind of solving a problem, right? You're taught as an engineer to solve a problem. Well, thinking through the problem of getting financing, I really tried to break it down into the steps and be prepared. And maybe that's why I've gotten a warm reception both on the debt side and the equity side, is that I had kind of thought through things really well before I present anything, which shows people that are trusting us with their precious capital, that we know what we're doing, even though this is our first development project. I mean, as a team, we have experience, whether it's the builder or my partner, the architecture firm that has been working with me on this from day one. They have tremendous experience, but putting all those components together into an easily digestible message, whether it's a bank or an equity partner, is really important. I went out and got a feasibility study. I mean, it is you have to pay for those things, and they're not inexpensive, but just And I did that because I knew in my experience that's one of the things
you were going to ask. Someone's going to ask for it, yeah,
right. And it you could do it without that, but I just feel like having that in your hand by somebody that is a third party, and does nothing but that professionally is very helpful. And so for the banks are going to be more technical, and when they look at things, so they want to see the numbers, they do want to see your experience, and if it's not your experience, it's somebody on the team's experience, in why they should feel comfortable with the repayment source. On the equity side, and it's a little more about the story. I didn't really know what kind of response I was going to get, so I started talking to banks early. I started talking about the project early with materials that kind of had some visuals, and I didn't even have any numbers in my initial presentations talking to potential investors. And there was just so much, there's just been so much interest. I feel like really, really lucky and blessed that there's been so much interest in the project just from my talking about it. And, we can't finalize anything until the first process of getting the debt sorted out is done. And then we can, figure out what our total need is to raise on the equity side. But I've just had a lot of people tell me that they would be interested in investing because of the story and because of everything that I've been able to present to them so far. Just get excited. I mean, it's just like people just want to be a part of it. It's like it's like why things do well on social media. Is people just want to feel like they're a part of it and involved, and layer on top of that it's a good business model, a good financial investment, and it works out well.
Yeah, I mean, we're also just like living through this like really, really special moment where there's enough institutional credibility now, I think, given to what's kind of happening in this experiential hospitality space with, I mean, even just very recently, obviously with Marriott's acquisition of, what was then Getaway, which, then became Postcard Cabins, and their partnership with Trailborn, right? You're seeing the big brands get into these, Hilton with AutoCamp, right? Like you're seeing these bigger brands validate, I think, the businesses that are a little bit more bespoke, that are a little bit more niche, that are a little bit more focused on experiential hospitality or nature immersion. And once that but that validation hasn't happened at scale yet, right? It's like just starting to, but like that I think is the sweet spot to be in, where there's enough validation, there's not too much validation. Like now's the time to go and make these things happen, which is why, my encouragement to anyone listening to this conversation is that, hey, if you've got the vision and you're excited about this and you want to build a brand, you want to build a micro resort, like there are a lot of people that that are interested in joining you in the project. They don't want to do the work though. Like
Right.
They're too tired. They've got a zillion other things going on. But I actually really do think like we'll look back and see this as sort of like a golden age in boutique hospitality, and in boutique in the truest sense of the word of these smaller operators, newer entrepreneurs coming into the space, building maybe one micro resort initially, maybe that scales to 3, and then having an exit if that's what they want, right? I actually really believe like now's the time to build. There's never obviously a perfect time, but there's enough validation, but there's not too much validation, and I think that should give people encouragement.
Yeah, I agree. I it's going to be interesting to see what happens as the bigger flags, the bigger brand names, I think they'll continue to try and move downstream. And by downstream, I'm saying from a size standpoint, because I think the traveler wants that intimacy and that special experience that, that has brought the rise of, of the Isaac French, Live Oak Lake, the Ben Wolfs and Onera, and all of the in between. We hope to capitalize on that. Not financially capitalize. I'm just because we're having fun creating something, and like in this moment in time to be able to have the luxury of creating something for our guests and for for Berkeley Springs, West Virginia at first, and then hopefully others. It's just really fun. I mean, it's what's been the last year plus since I started this journey is just been amazing, and really, really fun putting it together. You mentioned people. I think one of the reasons that we've had interest from from an investor standpoint, and interest from just people wanting to know what we're doing whenever I tell the story is exactly what you said, that they want to be a part of it, but it is a lot of work too. And I look back and I'm like, I mean, it didn't feel like a lot of work, because I think I was having so much fun doing it, like getting to this point. But, I've had so many people who I share the presentation, that our informational presentation with, and then talk to them on the phone, and we get done with like 25 minutes and they're like, I want to do what you're doing. I'm like, I haven't done anything yet. I mean, it's only been like a year, but I guess in that period of time, we really have moved the needle so much as far as, doing property. People, I have to remind myself, people saying this don't have a property today. They don't have a brand today. They just know they want to do something because they've, maybe seen it out there, on social media or in listening to your podcast. They want to do that too, but it does take a lot to get from there to even where we are in this journey. And so people, they want to be part of the ride. And I've had people just jump on board and tell me that they just want to watch it happen. But they, like you said, don't necessarily either want to or have the capacity time wise or whatever it is to go and actually do what we've done in the last year and a half.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why, we need people like you, who are willing to, put your boots on and get out there and make it happen. But, I'd love to do a check-in in like 6 months from now, just where we can talk about, progress and give listeners an update. I've been trying to do this a little bit more, and I might just kind of make this a formal series or something. But there are so many folks I know who are like kind of about to start, right? I think you guys are hoping to start construction if all things go well, like this spring in a couple months from now, right?
Right.
And it'd be really fun to be able to kind of like have a small cohort of people, maybe geodiversity and slightly different projects, where you get to talk to them right at the beginning before ground is, not at the beginning, right? Like they have some traction, they've got investors or they've got the land already or whatever, but you get to talk to them at, day zero, or the day that ground is broken, and then you check in at 6 months, and then of course at maybe 12 months or when project is complete. Maybe we do that, because I think that'd just be really fun for the listeners to like be able to go back and reference this conversation and then understand even like timeline and how long things took. And I think that would be I would enjoy it. so regardless of what anyone else thinks, like, let's do it because I think it'd be fun.
I think we should just do it because you would enjoy it, Zach. No, okay. I would love that. I think that would be a lot of fun. I mean, I wish I could tell you now what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but I don't know. And maybe that's part of the interest and intrigue about setting something out there to say, hey, let's do this again in 6 months. And, just like when I started this whole journey and found that property and thought when I stepped on the property, this is going to be something special someday. But I couldn't say then what it's going to be. Now I'm a little closer to saying what it's going to be. Like, I can sit here today and say, I think we'll have a pretty special story to tell in 6 months, but I don't know exactly what that is right now.
And that's part of what makes it fun, right? The magic and the mystery. So
for sure. Yeah.
But hey, Ian, thank you so much for taking time to tell your story today. And for folks who want to follow along on the journey, I'll have your Instagram linked below. Is there anywhere else you'd want to direct folks if they're interested in learning more? If you are looking for equity partners, is there a place you'd want folks to reach out other than Instagram? Where should folks go if they want to connect?
Yeah, at Instagram at Stay with Branch is the best place to follow us for updates. We're just starting to sprinkle in some project content into our feed, which is really exciting. Nice. But I can also be reached directly at ian@staywithbranch.com awesome. If anybody wants to connect with me directly.
Wonderful. And I will go ahead and have those links in the show notes below to make it easy for you listeners to connect with Ian. Thank you so much for your time, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Zach. This has been a lot of fun. I look forward to doing it again.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays or send me an email at zach@joinjourney.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@joinjourney.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at joinjourney.com/alliance. Again, that's joinjourney.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.